Let's begin. So, good morning, everyone. Have you ever wondered how our brain works and how things deal with very complex tasks? In today's lesson, we're going to learn our nervous system. And also, as a modern person, when we talk about neuroscience, what do you think of AI, right? As a modern person. So today we're also going to learn how our nervous system influences the development of the artificial intelligence. So probably one of the recent breakthrough in AI is by the DeepSeek, right? The DeepSeek is a Chinese company based in Hangzhou. So you may wonder why AI has been developed with such a fast pace, right? But what you probably didn't know is that the fundamental design of AI mimics our nervous system. So this may trigger an ultimate question: who is clever, AI or human? Well, before you give me your final answer, first we need to understand the human brain first, and that's the main point of this class. So after reading this class, I hope you guys will understand the general design of the nervous system. And also you'll be able to understand the basic function of each part of the brain area, and also can describe roles of synapses in our CNS, central nervous system, and also can describe how neuroscience inspired the design of artificial intelligence. Before we get started, let's recall what we have learned in the previous class. So what is an action potential? Yes?
An action potential is about to change when the electric and brain potential, which allows the transmit nerve signal.
Very good. So the action potential looks more or less like this, right? And the second question is, what is a neuromuscular junction?
The neuromuscular junction to which receives an impulse in order to generate an action potential for chemical reaction.
Very good. And can you recall what's the structure of the neuromuscular junction?
Then it has acetylcholine ligands in it, which the neurotransmitter can bind to.
Well, let's go step by step.
Great.
First is actually action potential. Remember, right? So we have the action potential travel from the motor neuron, right? Reaches this terminal or synapse, and which causes the influx of calcium, exactly here. Causes the influx of calcium. And which will cause the release of acetylcholine, which is a type of neurotransmitter, right, in the synaptic vesicles. And the acetylcholine will travel exactly through the synaptic cleft and reaches the end place of the muscle, where it causes inflame potential first, and then it triggers action potential, remember, and then causes the muscle contraction. So with this knowledge in mind, let's get started. So first, let's look at the general design of the nervous system. So here is the basic structure of a neuron. So on the top, inside the brain, we have the dendrites. So the dendrites are like antennae that release thousands of information from the parallel part of the neurons. And we also have the the cell body, or called soma, which is the metabolic hub of the neuron, and also is responsible for processing all these informations. And all the information will travel along the axon, extending down to probably the second order neuron shown here is inside the spinal cord, where they receive information through the synapses. So all these construct our basic functional units. So what are some of the properties of the basic functional units? The one we just mentioned, that incoming signals enter the neuron through synapses located mostly on the neural dendrites, as you can see here, right? So they receive information from the parallel neurons, but also on the cell body, so sometimes also on the cell body or the soma. And I just mentioned that it may receive thousands of information, so you guys may expect that there are thousands of connections, right? So, well, to give you an idea, so for different types of neuron, there may be only a few hundred or as many as 200,000 such synaptic connections from the input fiber. Imagine that. So a single neural cell isn't just listening to one voice, unlike what we learned in the neuromuscular junction. It basically listens to thousands of voices. And this information could be inhibitory stop signal or excitatory go signal. And also, each neuron sends out signal through a single axon, as we see here, and which can branch to connect many other cells. So in this end, they branch to many other cells. In this case, it's our second order neurons in the spinal cord. And lastly, synapses usually only allow signal to travel in one direction. Imagine if all this information can travel all over the place. What will happen? They will create chaos. This will create chaos. So this is very important for the proper nervous system function. This is very important for our proper nervous system function. So now you guys understand the basic functional units, and think about that our central nervous system doesn't work in isolation. It needs some stimuli, right? And where do the stimuli come from? It is from our sensory receptors. So in this figure, it shows our somatosensory axis of the nervous system, which is primarily responsible for the skin and also the muscle. Remember, we also have another type of systems that are responsible for instance, our sight, right? And for our taste, right? Etc., etc. But here, we focus on the somatosensory. So, here, as you can see, we have the sensory receptors, and they have several features. One is that most activities of nervous system are initiated by sensory experience that excite sensory receptors. Is that as we see, as we touch, as we feel, right? And also, these sensory experiences can cause immediate reaction, or memories from the past experiences that can be stored in brain for several times, okay, This may look a little bit hard to understand, But don't worry, I will cover you guys an example so you will have a better understanding of this. Before we get started, let's take a closer look of this somatosensory axis of the nervous system. So on the skin, we have several receptors. We have receptors for pressure, right? We have receptors for the pain, cold, warmth, and also touch. We also have receptors on the Golgi tendon apparatus that is responsible for the tension of the muscle. So you do not overstretch. You do not overstretch. We also have receptors on the muscle spindle that are responsible for detecting the length of the muscle. We also have kinesthetic receptor that is responsible for detecting the position and movement of our muscle, of our tendon, and of our joints. So when you close your eyes and raise your hands, you still know where your hands are. That's the function of the kinesthetic receptor. And also, as you can see here, we have this complex pathways. And you can see all this information are collected up to our hyoid, right? And now let's introduce you guys what are functions of these parts. So we have multiple sensory areas. To give you more intuitive example, imagine you are walking on your barefoot at home and suddenly, ouch, you stepped on a level brick. So what happens with your whole body? So first, the pain signal is collected by our pain receptor, right? And it enters our spinal cord. It enters our spinal cord. And then information will then pass to our reticular substance. So for the reticular substance, it is very important in regulating our heart rate and also our alertness. So you are awake, and also your heart rate will rise, right? And then information will pass through the thalamus. The thalamus is the brainless center of our central nervous system, is the brainless center of our central nervous system. And then information will pass through cerebellum, which we will cover in the next slide. And then the information will ascend to our cerebral cortex. That's where you feel pain. And also you can localize where the pain is, right? It's on my foot. So this is the sensory receptor. And what about how you react, right? Your reaction, that is the motor, right? Motor part, or the effectors. So now you instantly feel the pain, right? On your leg. And what happens with this circuit? Now you can see that most of these signals are traveling down, right? Are traveling down. So what are involved? First, the motor cortex. So the motor cortex needs to decide, right? My next movement, right? And what I need to do. And also remember, we just mentioned that for the sensory inputs, it causes immediate reaction. That's, well, I feel pain. And also maybe some memories. So this may cause you to recall a similar past experience when you were young, that you might also accidentally step on a little brick, right? Your past trauma. So this is the motor cortex. And then it reaches the basal ganglia, okay, in this area, that is responsible for correcting your movements so you do not overreact or you do not just freeze over there. And then we also have the cerebellum. So when you look at the cerebellum, it's very interesting that while almost all the arteries travel down, you will see the cerebellum, there is a kind of a loop between the cerebellum and our motor area, and also including our basal ganglia. It's because the cerebellum is very responsible for the fine-tune of your movements. So imagine you try to jerk your foot away and try to find your balance. There is a very fast computational process between your motor area and the cerebellum, telling your foot to go next step without falling down, right? So that's the function of the cerebellum for your coordination. And then message, it also reaches the reticular substance, as we just mentioned, responsible for our nervous and also your heart rate. And finally, it reaches your spinal cord. I need to remove my legs, or I need to jerk it away, right? So this is the full circuit. Please also bear in mind here, there is an external point where information do not travel to the upper of our brain. What is that? This is the phenomenon of the spinal reflex. So basically, when you instantly step on the leg brake, even before you realize it, your foot jerk away. So this is really a protective mechanism without telling you your brain, because all this tract, there is a delay, right? But if in the spinal cord level can deal with this by itself, then actually we save a lot of time, right? So all these are our sensory motor circuits. So now let's look at how our brain processes and also how our brain learns and remembers. And here also I will try to introduce you guys how AI also processes, learns, and remembers, how it mimics our brain. So, first is about processing of information. In the process of information is called a kind of integrative function of our nervous system. So what are some of the features? Is that nervous system processing incoming information for mental and motor responses. The example we just mentioned about stepping on the leg, right? It causes immediate motor response. You jerk your foot away, or when you try to shout, trying to reach for help. And also mental, right? You may recall your past trauma or similar circumstances. However, for the sensory inputs, our brain is highly selective. Imagine at least a crowd, you are watching a football match, right? So there's crowd, there's noise, there's lights, and even the nudge from someone else. But your focus is on the ball or your favorite soccer ball player, right? So this means that actually over 99% of the sensory input is discarded as irrelevant. We only pick roughly 1%, the most important ones. However, important sensory input is directed to integrative and motor regions for the brain to cause a desired response. So now, your favorite player goes, and all these sensory, this visual sensory inputs, right, cause you an immediate desire response. You stand up and cheer, right? And think about this, over 90% of the sensory input is discarded. We just mentioned that. So in this time, right in this time, your phone rings. You may just ignore it, right? You just ignore it because now this is the most important time, right? And also, actually, this brings us the breakthrough in AI. In 2017, it was this paper released called "Attention is All You Need," changed the whole game of AI. So basically, for decades, the development of AI met bottleneck because they used to treat the inputs more or less the same. So this was especially challenging because when the data set is very big, and then the model will lose its sensibility. So after the paper was released, so the attention mechanism was introduced. Okay, so the attention mechanism was introduced. So the model will fix on the selective data, making the new era of AI. So basically, you can say the new development of AI basically mimics how our brain prioritizes important information. And next, when we talk about all this information, the magic actually is not about all these neurons. It's actually basically the connections between our neurons are these synapses. So now let's look at the role of synapse in processing information. So the synapse is the junction point from one neuron to the next, very similar to that of the neuromuscular junction, right? We have the information from our motor neuron down to our muscle fiber. But what makes the synapse in the central nervous system different is that the synapse is a decision-making point. What does that mean is that there may be facilitatory, meaning that a signal that causes your next neuron to go, or even strengthen the signal, or inhibitory signal that causes it to stop, or even weaken, dampen the information. So all these synapses perform a selective action, often blocking weak signals or allowing strong signals to pass. That is fundamentally how our brain prioritizes things and discards irrelevant data. And also, actually, in AI network, it's kind of resemble our central nervous system. So this is a typical neural network training process. On the left, these nodes are the inputs, or you can say they're like the sensory inputs. So what you may ask, what are these sensory inputs? So basically, when you see a 5, so the contrast, the angle of this 5 are all inputs. And what are the outputs? The outputs basically the answer, right? When we see this, we say, it's a 5, right? And when we tell the model, okay, it tells me, okay, it's a 5. And what about these? So we have the input layer, we have the output layer. Between them are called hidden layers. Hidden layers. So these nodes are actually resembles our neurons. And actually, our neurons are stacked in layers, basically the same in our brain. So they stack in layers, in different layers. And what about these connections? What about these connections? So these connections are the numerical weights that can influence the next or the information between the neurons. So very similar to that of the synapse that will cause an inhibitory or excitatory information to influence other neurons. Okay, so this may look a little bit hard to understand or a little bit hard to follow, but don't worry, I will give you guys an very practical yet the simplest example so you can have a better understanding of this. So the question is, should I bike to work today? So when I think about biking to work, I've been thinking about several things. Did I study well last night? Is it raining? Is it windy? How bad air quality today? And how do I have time to shower once I get to office? Because when I get to office, sometimes I just need to have an immediate meeting or something, right? So these are what? These are the inputs, right? These are the inputs. And imagine we can actually scale the inputs between 0 and 1, meaning that how important they are. And multiply them by a factor, by a weight, as we just mentioned. But what is the weight? It is how it is important, how it is relevant to my decision. So this equation shows, so the decision score is, right, the rate, the factor of rate times its weight, plus weight times weight, etc., etc. So give you some examples. So in this scenario, let's say we have factors, right? And the factors, and we say these are the factors: the rate, right? We have the weight, we have pollution, sleep quality, right? Sleep quality, and also shelter time. And so these are their input values, okay? Meaning that their intensity. So, for instance, so today is, there's no rain, okay? So, it's 0, right? And also say, it's a light pollution, right? Or it's a little windy, okay? Sorry, it should go here, and the factor should go here. And yeah, so no rain, light wind, and also say light pollution, but your sleep, kind of a poor sleep, so the score should be like 0.4 something, right? And also you have time to shower time 1. Just 1. And for the weight is that how we think these factors matter, right? So, for the rain, I hate rain, so when it rains, I don't want to buy it. So, I was assigning that 0, the minus 0.09, right? And also say it's weight, it's windy, so I don't like it, There also minuses. And the pollution, I hate it, right? I hate it. And also sleep quality, it's fine, so I would say it's plus 0.6. And shower time, 0.5. So we just make a simple calculation. You know, like I don't want to spend too much time. You calculate it, and we sum it. So our score is 0.59. So should I go to backward today? Yes. Yes. And another scenario is that today is a heavy rain, right? It's a heavy rain. So we can change the intensity to what? To 1, right? It's a heavy rain, right? And also today's windy, light pollution, you know, you sleep pretty well, okay? So in theory, you should go work by bike, right? But there's a heavy rain, right? And shorter time, I'm really, you know, instantly when I get office, you know, I need to have a meeting or have a class. So we also do another calculation. It's what? It's minus 0.59. I don't go to work. I should not. So actually now you understand the weights in the AI resembles the synapses, and each person will weigh things differently. Is how our synapses are formed. For instance, I am experienced by computer, so actually I don't care too much about the ring, you know. So for this weight, I will just score it like 0.1, you know, unless a heavy ring, I'll just go by it anyways. But since, you know, I care too much about my health and also I have rhinitis, so I probably will score my pollution like minus 100. So if there is a pollution, I just don't go. So different people with that will react differently. So this is fundamental of the AI. Okay, this is fundamental of the AI. Also our brain works. And also this brings us a very interesting part. When you see a new AI model released, you often see that they say, I have how many billions parameters, right? Instead of like traditional gigabytes. So actually the parameters are the number of the weights. The number of the weights. So more parameters mean that there are more, we say, synaptic connection, or, you know, these connections. And so the AI model will perform more sophisticated tasks. Okay, so this is the fundamental of this of AI. We measure by parameters. Also, actually, for human, you know, in medical terms, called synaptic plasticity. You know, so when we were young, you know, we learn a lot of things, we travel a lot, we witness a lot of things, and this will build our unique and very strong unique pattern and strong pattern of our synapses. Okay, so now let's talk about the memory, you know, the ultimate goal, the memory. So how does the memory work? Because there's a little bit something, right? There's a something. So again, we have this example. So imagine you recall your childhood's trauma of studying on a level. And we just mentioned that the most sensory input doesn't cause immediate motor actions, but most internal. So now, you know, even after several years, you still remember the scene. But you can wonder, what about the rest of the things, you know, other mind stimuli during that day? What happened? Are these memories lost? Are these memories lost? Well, actually, much of the sensory information will be stored, but it's just that how we react. You know, 99% will be stored, but you know, much of the sensory information is stored, mainly in the cerebral cortex, in the form of these intricate, complicated synaptic connections, right? and store information actually guides future moral control and thinking. So, because I realized this was a very strong stimulus. So next time when you walk barefoot at home, you become extra cautious. Or even when you look at a liquid on the floor, it instantly triggers your sensation. It's part of your memory. It's part of your memory. And finally, memory becomes part of the brain's future processing and thinking mechanism. Becomes a part of the brain's future processing and thinking mechanism. Okay, so now let's focus on something more practical. Is that how can we learn effectively? How can we learn effectively? So, because while you're listening, you're passively receiving a stream of knowledges, right? And something, you may regard as important, but many of them will be discarded. That's the reason why studying is a really painful process. However, when you take notes, you're actively engaging what you are learning, and you're trying to assemble everything, making the study process an active one instead of a passive one. So taking a note isn't just about a transcript. It's a cue to help your brain to reorganize what you have learned. So actually there is a famous Chinese proverb called 好记性不如烂笔头, meaning that the faintest ink is more powerful than the strongest memory. Okay? So it's advisable for you guys to take notes. It's not only about transcript, but also an active engagement. Okay, so a few questions for you guys. One is list the top 3 main structures of a neuron and their respective functions. Yes? Who first?
Okay, it's the dendrite, stoma, cell body, and the eggs and
Yeah. So the 3 main structures, the cell body, dendrite, and also exactly. And also synapses, but the main structure, right? And choose briefly explain what parts of the nervous system are involved when one accidentally touches a hot stove. Yes?
spinal cord, reticular substance, and we have development, cerebral cortex.
Yes. And also, it's good to mention that we also have our spinal reflex. So instantly, when you touch the hot stove, right, you jerk your hands away, right? And explain functional property of the synapses in central nervous system.
First properties are synapses, synaptic transmission,
Yes, transmission.
and second one is synaptic delay.
Delay. Delay. One of the most important properties is that it travels in one direction, so it doesn't cause chaos. Yes.
It inhibits the weak signals and facilitates the strong
Very good.
signals
Yeah.
in order to lead to a more concise response.
Yes, very good.
Sulfur decision making.
So we wait all this input information to the synapses and then for final decision. Very good. And brief explain how neuroscience inspired the development of AI.
Before, there was a lot of input, therefore, the researchers were confused what to do with the data. But then, how our brain makes the information, it discards the irrelevant stimulus and focuses on the main part.
Yeah.
AI also does the same thing now. Attention is what's needed.
Yes.
Through different neural pathways, it goes to that specific point where it needs to generate that output, and therefore it gives an accurate result, therefore making it more useful for us.
Yes, very good. So actually, the release of the attention mechanism, so there is a giant step of the development of AI. So to summarize, so neurons are the basic functional unit of the nervous system. They transmit, process, and store information. The major structure of the neurons are the dendrites, cell body, soma, and axon. And sensory input are ascending through multiple central nervous system level for processing, while the motor commands or our output, right, our effectors, descend from the brain to muscle, together enabling rapid reflexes and purposeful movements. You want to jerk away or run away. And the structure and function of biological neurons and synapses have direct inspired the artificial neural network, which is learned, where adjustable convention weights mimic the synaptic strength. Okay, this is the key point in AI, enabling AI to learn, adapt, and recognize patterns, just like the human brain. And there's also a summary for you guys to look at how AI mimics our human brain. So for the next class, please review the chapter of the synapses. Will look into how the synapses connection work and how they influence the next neurons. Okay? And so for the final thought, who is stronger, human brain or AI? Well, it's an open question, right? Well, yeah, so in my opinion is that the AI has been developing an unprecedented step, that's for sure. But, it's been just less than decades, right? But our brain has been developed for millions of years. And also, AI has still many challenges. One is the energy consumption. It consumes a lot of energy. Well, actually, that's one of the pro in China, because China has a lot of electricity. And also ethical issues. Okay, there's ethical issues. So actually, China is actually advocating ethical framework for AI. So that's part of the proposal of the China's community of common destiny. Okay, so for the AI, it's an open answer. I hopefully think that in the future it's a collaboration between human and AI. Yeah. So do you have any questions for this class? Okay, thank you very much.